So now we come to a second structure built by Herod the Great. This is the Herodion. And unlike Masada, which Herod never went to and was built almost entirely or exclusively as a fortress of escape, this one is incredibly ornate, and he went to it often. We see classic theater here, where entertained guests heard music and acting. It was decorated, well painted, artisans to design. In fact, this project got a very fast, accelerated production because the second in command from the Roman Empire, the second only to the emperor himself, made a visit here. And Herod the Great really wanted to impress him. Now this thing is super, super tall. It wasn't, the hill itself naturally wasn't this tall, but Herod asked them to raise this thing several feet so he could see Jerusalem from the top. And so you get a feel for this as you begin to go up the steps here, as you head up into the top of the Herodium. Down below, there's a swimming pool and bathhouse and other traditional Roman gymnasium type features. But as you head up to the top of this fortress, where again Herod the Great came here often, the Herodium is only a few miles from Jerusalem, and so he would come here often and would entertain guests here. He spent a lot of money and a lot of personal investment in producing this stunning fortress and palace. He started this construction around 20 BC. It was finished very quickly because of the visit coming from Rome. And in fact, at the very end of his life, he ordered the destruction of most of it because he wanted to be buried here and then have this be a site of his burial and not the palatial place of entertainment. They didn't actually destroy as much of it as that he had wanted, but he did ultimately get buried here. They discovered Herod the Great's body casket here in 2007. The archaeologists discovered it in 2007. It is now no longer here at the Herodion, but at a museum in Jerusalem. But this is really a striking location. We're about to come, as you come up the stairs through these Roman archways, we'll come up on top of the Herodium, and on top there are 4 towers overlooking the valley below. And in fact, ironically, one of the things you can see quite clearly from the Herodium is the city of Bethlehem. And then later, Kim and I went down to the city of Bethlehem, to the location of what's called the Shepherd's Field, a chapel built on top of the site that, whether it's the exact site or not, I'm not sure, but the site that has historically been linked to the appearance of the angelic host to the shepherds on the night to announce Jesus' birth. And so you can imagine the contrast here between Herod's Herodium overlooking or overshadowing the birthplace of Jesus. And here the King of Kings and Lord of Lords is born and is placed in the manger of a small location, nothing like the pomp and circumstance and the palatial location here of the Herodium. And so we can see the contrast between Herod the Great and the birth of Jesus himself. So now here we are up at the top. This is one of the towers. This is the largest tower, and they've rebuilt it, but they built it with kind of a metal building. And there's some pictures from the top of that I'll show you in just a second. But this is the palace area down below. You can see this area. It had a lot more structures here. They've since collapsed or fallen. They're rebuilding or making many of them here. Okay, this right here is called a casement wall, and all of these fortresses have this. It's 2 walls with a gap between them. And the idea is that during times of peace, you could use this space between the 2 walls as a place for storage. But if you were under attack, what you would do is fill in this gap between the 2 walls with dirt and rocks and other material to reinforce the wall, so that instead of having 2 separate walls, you would have one massive wall. And that way, if someone was trying to destroy the wall or damage the wall from the outside, you would now have a buffer between it and the second wall, and so that's called a casement wall. So here's a picture looking at the tower and looking out across the Herodium. And then what we see here now is looking out from that. This looks out towards the Dead Sea. This location from here, you could probably on a clear day, it was not clear, see the area of the valley leading down toward the Dead Sea. And so as you look across, there's other places here. Tekoa is a small village here. There's a famous story about the woman from Tekoa who confronts King David at one point over his son Absalom. But this scene here, this is a picture looking out towards Bethlehem. Can't really see it too well from here, especially since it's really cloudy while we were there. But this looks out towards Bethlehem and towards the place known as the Shepherd's Field. And then ultimately there's a birthplace, there's a chapel or a church of the birth of Jesus in Bethlehem. And so this looks out over that particular area. Now, after Herod's death, he is buried here. He orders the execution of the entire Sanhedrin on the day of his death because he was afraid no one would cry for him because they all hated him. He was not a much loved leader at all, despite all the construction work. But years later, the Herodium is recast as a rebel site. And we talked about this with Masada, where in 70 AD, after the destruction of Jerusalem, a group of rebels, zealots, go out to Masada and plan on retaking Jerusalem. Well, there's another group of zealots around 135 AD who take up a spot here in the Herodium where they are, you can see these tunnels they've dug down deep into the Herodium, the cisterns that they dug out. In fact, I walked through this little pathway. This is dug out around 135 AD, where the group of zealots who've holed up here, they dug out these tunnels, and that way they can pull water without going outside and being exposed to military action. This rebellion was, again, the target was to try to retake Jerusalem with grand plans to do so. The zealots hole up here. And again, much like Masada, it eventually fails. They don't retake Jerusalem. The Roman Empire deals with them harshly. They're all killed. But the place that they went, this other palace and fortress, was really quite the place to set up your rebellion. And so anyway, so this is the Herodium. It's an incredible place to visit.